maintenance-oriented, wellness person, physical activity person, and former world-class gymnast. And so what we're talking about now in part 3 is the difference between young people today and young people when Kirk was coaching them. And then even before that, let's go back and ask him to start off with the kids of his era, what the challenges were back then and what was easier. One thing that came to me is going to PE class in the 60s and 70s when I was growing up and graduated high school in 81, that was the exciting time of the day. The after-school sport was the exciting time. The research was the exciting time. The coaches weren't competing with smartphones and YouTube back when I was in college. So they got this whole, they were kind of like the kings of the campus because we wanted to be out of science many times and in to our softball games and our running races and our football games with these coaches. It was a fun recreational thing. So maybe share a little bit about your time growing up as an athlete, Kirk, and then bring us into how you coached and what changed over your decades, and then take us all the way up to what kids are faced with today.
Well, if I think back, for me, PE was probably my most enjoyable class, just like how you had explained. I really loved going there, and I thought most of the kids did too. What was different back then was girls and boys were split. I don't know if you had this as well, but we were not together in PE in the 70s when I went to PE class. So there were women teachers that taught women and men teachers that taught the boys, and they were completely split. So that's a difference right there. In general, I would say kids back then, we were concerned about our appearance. We were concerned about our hair. We pushed the line, right? We did push the line a little bit, push limits. Those are the types of things that really haven't changed all that much to kids today. They still do that, okay? Clothes, I don't know if you remember the clothes we wore, the gym suits we wore. It was just shorts and a shirt, and then those bloomers things the girls wore, even though we weren't together. So that's all changed. Kids today, in some respects, they're very similar. They still push for their identity, push for their independence, push the line. I think the line has moved. I think parents have moved the line. But that's a change. But a couple of things that come to my mind that are concerns of mine and differences from when I was a kid is kids today, through my 34 years of teaching, as time went on, they seem to be less resilient, less able to cope with difficulties. That's one change that I see from when we were younger. And I say that because of the attrition rate in sports, how many kids that join and quit. I don't know if you've heard of club hopping. Have you ever heard that term?
I haven't heard it, but it makes sense to me.
Well, they change, they don't get what they want. They're not a starter. They're not a star. They don't play the position they want. So instead of trying to find a way to make that happen through an inside-out approach, they quit the team and go to a different team that gives them what they want. Mm-hmm. You also see things with regard to, I think they're seeing a little bit more in depression with kids. I never remember a kid when I was younger, and maybe you did, I don't know, cutting themselves.
No, we didn't have that.
No, so they have that. So that deals with depression and attitudes about those things. And
self-loathing, that's a big one. I'm sure we had our moments of that, but I think it's more extreme now, the self-loathing and loneliness, like a single parent home, nobody's home. You show up at home and nobody cares about you, you might think.
Yes. And then also, think about it back when you were younger. I don't ever remember once a kid coming into a school with a gun and taking other kids' lives. Ever. Yeah. So I think now again, social media does play a role in this with all the pressures that they have that we didn't have. So that is a factor. I think that is definitely a factor. Bullying when we were younger, I was bullied, but you went home and it was over, right? I don't think some of these kids ever get to leave that now that they're on social media and things of that nature. So that piece. The other piece is what I call and I talk about this in Becoming a True Champion, short-term gratification trap or short-term gratification, and how that leads to a behavior that's kind of extreme. You had mentioned the word extreme, eating Tide Pods. Can you imagine a kid eating soap when we were younger, or some of the other challenges? Or, I remember one of the big things for me as a teacher that I saw change, and it deals right with the short-term gratification to get noticed, is the amount of piercings and where they're doing them and the tattoos. And we're not talking about people that are 18, 19, 20 and young adults can do whatever, whatever decision they make is their choice. I'm talking about 14-year-olds and 13-year-olds coming to junior high with tattoos. These are permanent things.
Mm-hmm.
That's the behaviors, the extreme behaviors. Those are different than what I grew up with. I don't know if you can attest to that as well, or.
I think so. I did some work in education, and I taught a PE class one time, and the PE teacher, this would have been like in 1999, he had been there through the 70s. And he said in the 70s, the kids weren't as big a problem as the parents. He would have parents that were on a substance come in and start arguing with him when they were incapacitated mentally, and he had to deal with that. And I think that the challenges were, it was always a moving target. I will say this, there was a high school in Santa Barbara that when they said that they were bringing the marijuana sniffing dogs to campus one day, I think this would have been around 2009, that the lot where the seniors and juniors parked was only 20% full that day. Everybody parked off in the streets because of the marijuana sniffing dogs were going to be there that day.
Well, I do. In fact, in that respect, I'm not sure it's changed that much in high school, because we've had dogs coming into high schools. That still happens today. With regard to parents, I do see a shift with them where they may have had to deal with those types of parents. I think the numbers of parents that are coming in today to rescue their kid from difficulty, I see a lot of that today.
Yeah.
Back when I first started teaching, I never had a parent come in and say, "Why did you fail my kid on his test?"
No.
That happens. I've had parents come in. I've had to actually sit and show justification that I taught the material that their kid was tested on, because they couldn't understand why their kid didn't fail. What ended up happening, now this is hours of time and phone conversations where he finally came in, finally finds out from his kid that he didn't study. Well, I could have told him that in the beginning. I had to bring out the homework that was given, show him that only 12% of the class failed the test. Most kids got A's and B's. Those are changes that I definitely seen with parents and with kids teaching high school.
Yeah. How about the idea of winning and versus sustainable athletes? So I had a conversation with someone the other day, and he said this whole idea of giving everyone a participation award for being in the race is something that doesn't resonate with him. And I said, I think I'm going to listen to your side, and I'm going to consider that. I said, I think it's good for everybody to get something for being at the event, like field day. There's got to be something everyone who shows up and does their best gets for participation. But I don't think you need to have ribbons past the first, second, and third place in sort of the competition side of the awards. Those are two different things. And I think that people wanting that for their kid now, in this gentleman's opinion also, it's like, if you don't win and you're in sales, you don't get the deal, and you may not keep your job. So if we're giving people these awards for coming in last, that may not be the right thing either. So maybe you can share your thoughts on that, Kirk.
Well, I've actually given this a lot of thought, because there's always those two mindsets. And I think we've gotten too wrapped up in, what's the word, feelings or failure as a bad thing. I mean, how did I feel when my coach told me, this is a little bit out, it's a stretch, you're not going to be able to do this. Let's start, how did I feel about that? I think I don't look at failure the same way that other people do. I don't think failure to me, there is no such thing. There's either learning and success. Failure, there's no real failure. So I kind of go along the lines of what you presented. I don't see any reason to change the structure of trophies and things of that nature. You get what you earn. I think that's an important aspect of life. You should get out of life what you earn. Nothing really should come to you free with regard to that. On the other hand, I think it's important that people get recognized for the efforts they put in. Now, if I look at my high school, I think they do, and most high schools that I know of, they do a nice job of that. You get letters your freshman year, or numerals your freshman year, a smaller letter your sophomore year, and JV in your junior year, and then you get a large letter your senior year. So everybody who's on the team gets recognition that they were on that team, and you also get a certificate of participation. I have no issues with it. I think that's a great thing because it does designate that you were here. You know, for the kids that are there every day, may not win first place, but they're there every day. I think it's important to recognize the efforts that goes into being there and showing up. Mm-hmm. I think there's something that's very important to, well, if you want to be really good at something, there's a ladder you have to climb, have effort. And just because I use this example a lot because I get asked this when I speak. And they'll say, well, you took first. You know, you were a national champion. Well, okay. Let's assume for the sake of argument, I put in all the same efforts. And I took fourth. Now, my goal was first, but I took fourth or sixth. Now, I'm not even on the stand at sixth. So I came from non-existent, someone that no one even knew, to sixth place in the state, or maybe, let's say, ninth in the nation, from a position of nowhere.
Obscurity.
So if I did that, did I learn anything less? And see, that's kind of how I put that. I'm like, so the value is in what I gained intrinsically. And I need to look at that. That's what's important to me. So even though, I mean, the trophies, all the trophies I have, you know what they do now? They collect dust. They sit on a shelf, and there's a lot of dust that gets on them, and I got to dust them off. Or they're some people, they'll put them in a box, and they never even look at them again. Yeah. But then the question is, well, where is the value? Well, the value in trying, because people said that to me. Well, if you're not going to win or you're not going to get the scholarship, what's the value? I'm like, are you kidding me? Just because you didn't get the scholarship that you wanted, the value is in the doing something that and putting forth the effort that other people tend to shy away from. Because that piece now you take, and now you use that in your job. You use that in sales. And those are the pieces. Those are the things that I notice about my daughters that I'm very, very proud of as a father. Because they were successful athletes, both Division I scholarship athletes, one in volleyball, and she was only 5'4". So how do you get to be a Division I athlete in volleyball? The other one in soccer, she tore her ACL as a sophomore. She blew her ankle as a senior, had 2 major surgeries, and still competed Division I soccer as a starter on a fairly good team. So people would say, well, what do they do when they're done? Well, right now they're successful in sales, and one's a life coach. And they're very successful because they understood from taking those principles and applying them in life. It wasn't about the goal. It wasn't about the scholarship. It was about what was in the inside. And hopefully they will treat and teach their kids the same thing. To me, that's what parenting in life is all about. That's kind of how I look at it. So in answer, going back a little bit, going back to your question, I think those are not mutually exclusive things. You can reward kids and show recognition of the efforts they put in just by being there, and you have earning of trophies. And I think that's kind of what you alluded to with your comment.
Yeah, participation and competition are two related things, but they're separate things.
They are separate. And I think we get too caught up into one or the other. And I'm like, no, this is not black or white. Mm-hmm. There's a bigger picture out here.
Yeah, some of the books that I read, the Jack Reacher novels by Lee Child, when they need Jack Reacher to go do something, somebody always seems to come up with his file, and it's a very extensive file, and so it's like, what can you put in someone's file per year if you're in the military? I don't know, 3 things, 5 things, 10 things, but that's not all that you did. That's just some
Piece.
highlights of things that you did. And if someone has it in for you, or they were absent when you did something, that other part might not make it in to your file. And the way we do sports and the way we do a GPA and our scholastic achievement, it's not the whole picture. These are just indications, and sometimes arbitrary, based on, here's a teacher, they've got to get in their grades, they've got to put some comments down, and they've got 1 week to do that under pressure at this very busy time, and they got to get it all done under deadline. It can't be a perfect reaction from that teacher, but they have to do their best, I guess.
Well, that your point you're making there brings up the idea of the youngster watching television and seeing a professional athlete and saying, I want to be that, I want to, which is great. I think that's a great dream to have for any kid, but not really contemplating what happens behind the scene. You've ever seen those pictures of the iceberg and you see the outcome, you see but happens underneath. That's what you're talking about. When you're talking about grades and trophies and all, those are outcomes. It's the process that has the value. And I think sometimes we lose focus on that. It's one of the things that I learned that was very important in my athletic experience. One of my foundational beliefs, that process over outcome, scholarship, all those things. Those are great to have those goals first, whatever goals you have. But keep in mind, the value is in the process. When we keep that value on the process, the chance of these outcomes happening are greater, but there is no guarantee. So the value to me is in the process. Probably one of the most important lessons.
Yeah, living each day. If you look at each part of the day as part of that process of getting through it, it all makes sense. Some of the individual things we do are very challenging and maybe even boring, but that's part of the process. I wrote down in a note I sent you, it takes a strong man or woman to be balanced. Balance takes a lot of hard work, a lot of coaching, the whole individual. And then it also requires the idea of self-mastery and a person using circumspection, using their coaches and their peers, saying, hey, what do I need to work on? If you were in my shoes, how would you approach this? And so this idea of self-mastery, I didn't even hear the word probably until I understood Bruce Lee, who I started reading about, but his whole life was involved with self-mastery, and he didn't make it. He was chasing women. He had a overworkaholic type thing. He had a lot of, he was in the 60s and 70s where he was an attractive guy and people wanted him for his brilliance, for his sexuality, whatever. He never made it to self-mastery, but in terms of his martial art, he made it extremely far. But that's not the entire self. That's just one aspect of this great guy who kept pushing his levels as far as he could. What I call him a master of balance. I think that's the reason he died at age 32 is because he wasn't.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. First, I want to mention that you mentioned Jack Reacher books. I read those too. I all those style of books, those fictional. I'm very much into fictional and even science fiction, but I just thought that was an interesting note. As far as mastery goes, I mean, the sport of gymnastics and balance, the sport of gymnastics, the whole sport is built on mastery, right? I mean, you're judging perfection. The better you do this, the higher you score than the person that didn't do it as good. So it's a very tricky thing. I mean, because it is a sport of perfection there, you have to be very careful with. And then you think about the athletes, even that I coach, the amount of time that it takes in that sport or any sport really to get mastery, plus the grades that are important for them, whatever else that they want to do. Well, how do you balance that and the social life that you need to become a well-balanced person? That's part of the challenges of being an athlete. That's another reason why I think it's important for kids to get involved in athletics or in physical activities to try to figure out, that whole balance and that whole perspective, the well-roundedness of life. I think it's one thing, and this gets a little bit off this subject of what the high schools have made a mistake in when they've gone all to college prep, right? Most high schools are all college prep now. Well, when I was in high school, you had electronics, you had auto mechanics, you had drafting, you had other options. You had trades in the school. We live in a society of extremes, so now everybody's got to go to college. Well, some people aren't built. They have other talents. So that's kind of where my perspective is in sports, my perspective is in school and education is the total individual, the whole individual. So I don't know if that kind of addresses a little bit about what you're talking about.
What would you say are some of the key mindset pieces for a young person so they can build the proper mindset of being a well-rounded person?
That's a really complicated question. I might first start with the lessons I learned as an athlete, because I think they're important, because there are things that I've used that have helped keep me moving toward different aspects of my life, whether it's fitness or eating properly or traveling, all those things that I like to do and try to be more well-rounded. I would say, and again, this is really important. Looking at life from an inside-out approach. Does that make sense? I think that way you take personal responsibility and ownership over what you want to accomplish, regardless of the adversity. And that's with the understanding that some people are going to start at a starting point that are higher than others. It's just life. So, number one, having an inside-out approach to life, I think it's important. And I think we've gotten away from that. If I look at issues today, there's a lot of people that look at an outside-in approach to life, that you have to give me something for me to be successful, rather than, I don't care what you give me. It doesn't matter. I can't control what you give me, so I'm going to do it anyway. So that's number one. The other one we've talked a lot about, and that's process over outcome. Always focus, because you can use that outside of just athletics. That's outside of the athletic arena. So process over outcome, fitness, process over outcome, diet, process over outcome, travel, process over outcome, reading and make sure you're getting both sides of a story so that you can use critical thinking to decide where you stand on certain issues. That. Third would be the idea of impossibility is really a state of mind. I think I mentioned this earlier in one of the other talks that we had. Well, again, at least within human genetic potential, right? I mean, some people will take me to task on this and say, well, what do you mean? Can you go fly? Well, no, I can't go outside my house and flap my arms and expect to fly like a bird. That's outside my human genetic potential using just my arms.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other options that could allow that. That's how Wilbur Wright, right? That's how they discovered flying and playing, etc. So that's I think that's another piece, is impossible is really a state of mind within one's human genetic potential. And the last thing that I think helps with that would be the idea of focusing on things that you can control more than things that you can't control. We have a lot of that today. There's a lot of focus on things you have no control over. Now, I have no control. Somebody watches this video and thinks maybe I'm off my rocker. I have no control over the thoughts that he has about me. None. I only have control over my thoughts and my thinking. So I think that those four pieces at least have helped me try to be more well-rounded. And I got to be honest, I tend to be definitely a little OCD and a perfectionist. So I have to be careful, because I tend to will lean that way and apply it to something and get so focused on forget about other things. So it is something, like you said, you have to be disciplined and think about this idea of, a well-rounded life and doing other things and taking some time, say, to sit back and smell the flowers. My daughters are very good at that. They're better at it than I am. Taking time to sit back and, notice all and appreciate the things that we have around us. Does that kind of answer your question?
That does. And the biggie that I was writing in my book, Are You Raising a Child Athlete? Things You Need to Know, is since these athletes and ex-military and ex-Broadway dancers and ex-general contractors, my study is finding they become sedentary, my thought is they don't learn at a young age that there is something that they can do on their own. So if I thought that if you're a freshman, if one of your assignments in PE is in your notebook is to put down a program that makes sense for you right now at age 14, and show you have to demonstrate the main movements of your physical program to your coaches, And that could be done in 2 minutes. You know, you show this is this, this is that, and you show one rep, right? You could do that, and you could talk through the ones that you can't do. Like I would run, and the way I would run would be this. On Monday, I would do this distance. On Tuesday, Thursday would re-rep, whatever. And you show a program that all the teachers are looking for is, does it make sense for this individual at their current level of interest and capability? And then every year you do another assessment on that, where the student has to show you that, and then maybe you have something where they check in, and when they come back in September and they show you their list of the stuff that they've done. So it's this follow-up through coaches, mentors, and parents, where this individual has their own program that they can do. And then to make it fun, you bring in the retired teacher like you, an author, and then the author wellness speaker like me, and we come in and we do a workshop, and they go, oh, look what this 57-year-old still doing, right? And it plants the seed, as you mentioned in the previous interview, of the potential. And so now it's normal. They come back in September, they go this, and then they graduate when they're 17 or 18. They go, okay, I know what to do based on all these years of doing my own program, what to do without my coaches starting tomorrow. So that's the big action step that I'm pushing for. What do you think?
I think it's great. In fact, you're actually on the same page I've been on through my whole career. My high school program kind of followed the lines that you just described. There are classes. Now, what we did, because we don't know where these kids are coming from, they come from different junior highs as they come in, some even from Chicago that transfer out. So they have a lot of different backgrounds. So they're freshmen. And we also have in Illinois, you're in California, right? In Illinois, there are certain things that are mandated to be taught. Health is one of them. So that's taught in the sophomore year. And they also allow driver's ed, which is crazy. No PE teacher likes this. That counts as PE in their sophomore year. So they're only getting freshman year really PE, and maybe one semester sophomore year if they take driver's ed their junior year. So the freshman—
The whole year?
Yeah.
Wow. We didn't have it the whole year in my high school. We had maybe driver's ed was a month and a half out of our PE season.
Okay, I misspoke. Well, they have driver's ed for a semester and health a semester. That's how they'll pair it. Okay, but in both of those, if you're not an athlete, you're not having any physical activity. One's in the classroom, both are in the classroom. Okay, so the way my school looked at it, and we used the same thing that you just presented. Freshman year was your foundational year. So there's a lot of concepts, different activities. What do they do to your body? What is target heart rate? How does that work? They have a final exam. Do they know the concepts? Can they actually run your target heart rate formula? Do they know where they need to be for aerobic conditioning? Do they know the skill and health-related fitness components and how they're different, and one relating to athletics, one relating more to health? That's all freshman year. Junior and senior year is where they do what you just talked about. In most of the classes, or many of the classes, I shouldn't say most, many of the classes, they design their own fitness program. And they leave high school with the idea of, for me, this is what I should do. We're researched on the internet, so on and so forth. To me, that's physical education. That's how it should be done.
Is that a state mandate or a district, or how did that come about?
Well, I was really a big part of pushing that. I did the workbook for the freshman year. It's been to me, it's just part of life. I actually pushed for that in our department, and all the other PE teachers agreed. So that's kind of where we moved over my career at that school. We moved in that direction. PE in general in Illinois, until very recently, is mandated for 4 years, but that sophomore year, they count driver's ed and health as one of those years. But I think it was the last state in the union that has mandatory PE. I don't think any other state has that. Wow. So that's a problem, because even the teachers in my building look down on what we do. They don't look at it as important. They don't, until you start bringing up the brain research that's out there about how kids do better academically when they're physically fit. You start showing them the science behind that. You have a hard time, especially the old school academic teachers. You have a hard time getting them to accept that.
One coach told me in the email I sent you, he said top athletes are programmed with coaching. They want to be led. Perhaps they don't know how to transition to the next part of life, since they were led for 2 decades, and now they're a freewheel bouncing down the road or landing in a ditch. And I see this so many times on these. This is a football life. This is a track life. I mean, these great athletes, and then they become challenged by life, mind, body, and spirit, work, financial, what have you. It's frequent that they have these challenges. In my opinion, it's not just their fault. I think it's the way that they were trained. There were emphases on winning, on performing, hurt, whatever. And when you got to the end of that road, they didn't know how to be a well-rounded, balanced person because other people were helping fill in those gaps for so many years.
I get that totally, 100%. And think about what I just said before about PE, physical education across the country, right? So the only place in the United States where it was 4 years mandated, and there were programs like I just talked about, and you had mentioned that you wanted to push toward, were in some schools in Illinois. I understand that there's a fine line, even me as a coach, because I've kind of walked both of these paths. When you're trying to increase performance, there's a certain way that you have to do that. There's a certain amount of effort, so on and so forth. So I understand the difficulty that a coach might have in bringing these types of concepts into their training because of the time frame that they're allowed. If the PE teachers across the country, see that no athlete, in my opinion, should be out of PE because athletics is different than PE. It's no different than people that say, well, can you do what you did on the still rings now? No, I can't. I don't train anything like that. It's totally different for a different purpose. So I think that's where we miss the boat, is understanding that athletics and performance and trying to master something at those levels and win it's different than the path that we need to take to maintain lifelong fitness. That is where PE needs to focus, and it needs to be across the country. So that's kind of how, coming from my perspective, how I look at those two things. I can even say with we practice, my girls practice 4 or 5 hours a day during the season.
Wow.
So, and that was just to get in the amount of reps they needed to be able to perform difficult skills, not get hurt, and do it in competition. So it becomes difficult where I'm going to be able to fit in, because even my sport, there's no aerobic. We're not aerobic. Gymnastics is not an aerobic activity. Any type of lifelong fitness is going to have some type of aerobic concept or component to it, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I have something in there. So to train gymnasts with that in mind would detract from the amount of things they need to do in their sport. So that's why I look to the PE teacher to do this. And it saddens me to see that some schools allow athletes to get out of PE. They don't have to take it because they're an athlete. Well, they're two different things. It also bothers me that across the United States, people look down on physical education as its importance. I think that's because with physical education, you can reach the masses. Athletes, non-athletes, unfit people, everybody. Athletics is going to reach a smaller percentage of population. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah. So, winding down, we're in the Corona time, the last few months. It showed how difficult it is to get people of all ages to, when they've closed down the playgrounds and the parks, in many cases, they've closed the beaches in Florida where I was a few months ago. What can you do with your limited space and with your limited apparatus to keep yourself fit? And that's really what my original plan was. My first website, maintenanceworkout.com, and my first workout was a hotel workout. So I show me doing dive bomb or push-ups on the bed. And if you want to do incline, you can do them right off the bed as well. And so right in a hotel room, you're limited. Now, if you go to the prisons, they're doing it in a cell. They have less stuff than I had in a hotel room, and they're doing quite a physically challenging workout. So the people now, I'm watching these young people in high school and junior college who are out of school. They're not figuring it out. And I told my friends, my girlfriend, I said, look, your kids need to have a daily program. It's not that we're going to go hiking with you tomorrow. No. What is your daily program? And part of your daily program is going on a hike with your mom tomorrow. That's fine. But every day has to have something. And you got to learn that, every 3 days you're going to hit the bigger muscles groups hard. You're going to do a balance workout and then a functional training workout and then a run and maybe some sprints, all these things. And to me, I'm wired differently. When I was watching Jack LaLanne and I watched my high school teachers and athletic coaches, I say, why would I stop doing this really cool stuff that I'm getting a high from, an endorphin high and the musculature growing, feeling the pump, all this. Why would I ever want to stop doing that because I put on a suit for work? It didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, it never did to me either. I'm going to go back. You said something that really piqued my interest. When I was done teaching, they take my keys away, right? So I don't have the opportunity to work out at school. So what am I going to do? So I started looking at health clubs, LA Fitness, Lifetime Fitness, looking at expense. How can I afford? What do I want to do? So I was sitting there and talking to, I can't remember if it was the Lifetime guy or the LA Fitness. And they were talking about how much their facility was better and all the things they offered. And my comment to him was, look, I get that, and yours may be more expensive than that because you offer more. I said, but you need to understand, I literally can work out in a closet. You could put me in a closet, close the door, and I probably could get in a good 40, 45 minutes of a workout that not only included aerobic, a cross-training type workout, aerobic body type. I could make it up right there on the spot. I said, so for me, that's not going to be necessarily a selling point because even though you might have this class or HIIT class and a swimming pool, people don't need that. And that's what you're talking about. It's just a mindset, of how that's important. And it's tough to reach kids. Kids in general, whether our era or today, it's hard for them. I mean, I did this for so many years. It's hard for us to create that importance for them. It's just how many times have people gone through their lives and looked back and said, if I only had done this better in school, and again, that gets back to why I wrote my book, so they wouldn't have to do that. There's one other thing that you mentioned that I'd like to go back to. Do we have a minute? Okay, you said something about parents and raising kids, right? Do you remember that just a little bit ago? I get asked this sometimes. What do you recommend for parents? What do you think? And my answer always kind of boils down to this. Athletes, non-athletes, whatever. As a parent, you want to sit back and give some deeper thought to the principles that you believe in, the things that you think foundationally are important to raise your kid with. For me and my daughters, it was being self-sufficient and independent, lifelong learners. That you don't need other people to give you things. You can make it on your own, even if people can't. Fitness was a big thing. Both my daughters work out 5 days a week. We didn't even have to. It was just it's become part of their lives, and I think that's.
And they're more pleasant and more open-minded and more cathartic, having gotten off that steam. So you're not having to deal with all of the what would you call it, the pent-up emotions as frequently as you would on the sedentary, fighting you every step of the day about getting out of the room kid.
That's right. And that would be my advice, no matter what your principles are as a parent, that as a parent, character was important to me. If that's a principle that's important to you, make that part of your foundation. And if it's really foundational, then you can't give on that. There's a point where you're flexible. There's always a point where you need to be flexible and be able to listen to someone else's concern, especially your kids. But sometimes it comes down to a matter of principle. So if you have principles that you are foundationally believe in, and you work from that standpoint, and you believe that those are good and solid principles, I think that helps parents in raising their kids. That's just the advice that I tend to give when I get asked that.
That's good. Yeah, we'll probably wind down now. We've gone through a nice process of learning, and that's really what charges me up. If I'm not speaking to someone like Kirk, it's and I don't have one planned, it's a downer for me. This learning and sharing, I think, is such a huge part of life. And that's one of the things I missed most when I left college, is I liked having those 3 meals a day with my confidants, and sometimes I'd go over and sit on a table with people on this team or that team, people that I didn't associate with as regularly, and I got to know everyone my freshman year, who was in the whole school, basically, not everyone, but a lot of people, just from doing that. And while I'm eating, I got a chance to share and to learn from people from all over the country, and some from other countries who were in, the long distance running group, the fencing group, whatever. And I think that's such a neat thing to do as part of college, rather than doing the same thing every day. Get out and go meet these new people and get jazzed about the learning process. Is that something that makes sense to you, Kirk?
Oh, very much so. In fact, you kind of hit on why I want to travel now, because I was not financially capable of doing that, even in this country. We just got back from right before this COVID-19 hit. I got back into skiing. Was a big skier. I helped run our ski club. So we went out to Telluride. I mean, I hadn't been skiing for 25 years. I'm 62, and people are like, "You're 62." I'm like, "Look, I'm going to do that, and that's what I'm going to do." And I'm still moving. I work out all the time, and oh my gosh, I fell in love with it again. So I can't wait to go back.
I would pick gymnastics and, well, a non-skating and ice type sport, like skating transferring over to skiing would be pretty good if somebody had been doing that. But having grown up skiing as you did, and then also the gymnastics and being a fitness person, I think that and being of shorter in size, all those things are very helpful for you to be able to pull off the 25-year lapse in your skiing. But for many people, that would be quite a challenge.
I know. Well, it's funny because, and again, this is the way I approach things. I actually went skiing once. I wasn't happy. Again, it gets into that OCD kind of mastery type thing. I wasn't happy about it. So I went and took a lesson from a level 4 instructor by us for an hour, got some points. And she goes, "Well, what do you want to learn?" And I said, "Well, I want you to give me things that I can go to Colorado on my trip to Telluride that I can work on, so I can be as good of a skier as you," because she was probably one of the best skiers I had ever seen. Better than she looked like butter melting in a pan. And she goes, "Oh, well, then I'll give you those things." And so when I go out to Colorado, I spent an hour doing the things she taught me. And oh my gosh, it was, for me, just getting my body to do that. That's where I get a lot of self-satisfaction and enjoyment. Like, wow, I was able to do this. It was hard at first. I was able to climb the ladder a little bit. I'm really looking forward to doing more next winter, hopefully.
Fantastic. Well, I will see you in Colorado. I've already booked my rooms, because Airbnb, you get the best options if you book a year ahead. And I've already done that. So hopefully all the mountains will be open, and we'll have a good ski season next year. And that actually, just that trip every year is a big part of my entire year's excitement, because it's the winter wonderland. Skiing secondary to being in that winter wonderland with the evergreen trees, the mountains, and the snow, and all the things that go along with that, the restaurants, the bus rides, all those other things where you can enjoy that whole moment.
Love it. I mean, everything you mentioned is why I love it. And the skill that's involved in trying to get better at edge control. And I mean, when I was younger, we used to pop off one ski and ski one ski. So I want to get back into doing those types of things. Have you ever gone to Telluride?
I haven't been. Some people this time told me I have to go to Telluride.
Oh my gosh. I went to Beaver Creek. I've been to Alta and Snowbird. Snowbird's a pretty tough mountain. Been to when I was younger. So then I started researching. I said, where do we want to go? Well, where there's good food, good accommodations, and a great mountain. Oh my gosh. This is far and above the best I've ever been to. It was beautiful. The scenery's unbelievable. There's hardly any lift lines. The food, I had and I'm from Chicago. I had some of the best pizza in that little town. It's in a valley, the town, surrounded by mountains. I cannot wait to go back. It's heads and tails above Beaver Creek.
Wow.
If you get a chance to go.
I'm going to put that down on my list. So we'll wind down now, and based on popular demand, we may be back. So be looking for us out there. We're here to share and hope that you can pick up some of the energy. I mean, we're two people with this positive energy. I think it's because of the process we're on. We do our thing. We try to do the best we can with the available time slot that we have every day and the energy level. And we're keeping learning, and we're keeping up the enjoyment and putting back into others. As Kirk has mentioned, he's had good success with his two daughters, correct?
Yes.
And so that's what it's all about. It's putting back, being that good mentor and that example for the other people. And we hope we can do that with you. And if you're going through challenges, please share. And if things are working for you, please share that as well. And give us a thumbs up, and we'll get back to you in the future. Aloha from Santa Barbara and from Naperville, Illinois. Sifu Slim and Kirk Mango.
It was great.